forgot a step when they were making them. They're fishing birds that don't have waterproof feathers. So once they're done fishing, they actually have to hang out their wings to dry off. Very goofy little guys. We've got sharks out here in our waters, believe it or not. But don't worry, we won't have any Jaws moments today. These sharks are relatives of prehistoric sharks. They're known as six-gill sharks. And they've lived so long because they've become adept at living in the dark, cold reaches of the depths of our Elliott Bay. They only come up sometimes very late at night, and usually when they're in a really bad position food-wise. So don't worry, we won't have to worry about any sharks on the trip today. We've got whales in our water, which I get asked about a lot. Now they're not as common here in Elliott Bay as we're pretty far inland, but I will say we've just started the season of gray whale migration heading south, and they love ghost shrimp, which are very populous off of the islands to our right. So in the next month or so, we have good chances of a potential sighting of maybe a gray whale. We get the occasional humpback whales out in our waters, which are beautiful. You always see them breaching or shooting out big mist out of their blowholes. There's potential for minke whales out in these waters. And then of course the orcas. Everybody loves and knows the orcas, so we'll talk a little bit about them in depth. As you'll see, we've got a ferry passing us on our right, so keep in mind I told you about those wakes. Might bump around a little here in a moment. So a little about orca whales, right? There's three types of orcas. We're going to talk about two. The third one we won't talk about because, believe it or not, I'm not a scientist. It's crazy, right? But also because scientists don't know a whole lot about them. They just got discovered in 2007. They're known as open water orcas, so they're thought to live in the expanses in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, because of that, very little is known in the sense of their migratory patterns, their feeding patterns, mating patterns. So we'll talk about the two that are very common, that everybody knows or heard about. We've got our resident orcas, which are also known as the J, K, and L pods, if you've heard that terminology. They live here in the Puget Sound. And then we'll talk about transient orcas, which many of you are more familiar with. Those are the ones that live from the southern coast of California up to the northern tips of Alaska. Now, what's the difference between resident and transient orcas? There's a few differences. First, probably the biggest difference is their diet. Our local orcas, the ones that live in the Puget Sound, survive solely on salmon. They only eat salmon. They're adept